In 1991, I published my first trade book, and it was called Illiberal Education. This is what it looks like: Illiberal Education: The Politics of Race and Sex on Campus. This book is widely credited with inventing the phrase political correctness. But I didn't actually coin the phrase. I heard it on the campus. I used it in the book. A New York Times review of the book was called The Rising Hegemony of the Politically Correct by Richard Bernstein. And that's what made that phrase famous. That's what brought that phrase into popular culture. Later, Bill Maher had a show about it called Politically Incorrect. Amusingly enough, I was on the last episode of that show with Bill Maher. And he got fired for making some politically incorrect remarks. Irony of ironies. Weirdly, he tried to blame those remarks on me, even though what he said was completely different than what I said. This is a story I'll tell another time. Where I'm going with this is that illiberal education was an expose of a rising tide of illiberalism on the liberal campus, a rising tide of intolerance. Many campuses were adopting speech codes that outlawed not only things like hate speech, but anything offensive, anything that made people uncomfortable. In one case, there was a speech code that outlawed misdirected or inappropriately directed laughter. And I was thinking about that recently because what's happened really in our society is that the intolerance of the campus has metastasized into the larger society. We're now seeing it all over the place. Shutdowns of speech. In effect, what is digital censorship if not a certain kind of a national speech code? A speech code in this case that is moderated not by a bunch of campus deans, but by a handful of digital moguls, like the guy at Google and the guy at Facebook and the guy at Twitter, working in coordination with each other. So what is it that they are trying to police? I think that this phrase, misdirected or inappropriately directed laughter, is the key to it. Because we think that they're trying to police debate. They don't want dissent. They don't want argument. But the truth of it is, if they had argument, they could ignore us because we don't have the big megaphones they do. Argument's not what they're afraid of. I would suggest that what they're really afraid of, more than anything else, is they're afraid of ridicule. They're afraid that we will laugh our heads off at what complete frauds and fools they are. And the reason that they're afraid of that is they know that they're frauds. They know that. That's why they're so thin-skinned about it. They go around preening and putting on airs, but they know that behind this is a very fragile ego. Let me give a couple of examples of what I mean. Here's a tweet by Hillary Clinton. Her name is Dr. Jill Biden. Get used to it. So what Hillary's getting at here is let's all start calling her, Jill Biden, Dr. Jill Biden. Now, Jill Biden has been a community college school instructor. She's not a medical doctor. So what's the point of this Dr. Jill Biden? Well, obviously it is to put on airs, to act like you're some sort of a refined intellectual, or even that you've got medical credentials, even though you obviously don't. It's a form of, people who have real achievement don't do this kind of thing. You'll never hear, I'm Dr. Albert Einstein. Hey, that's Dr. Stephen Hawking to you. No. Even people who are PhDs but are geniuses in their field let their achievements speak for themselves. They don't need this doctor nonsense. Now, Chris Wallace was recently on Fox News, and he said, well, what's wrong with it? We have Dr. Henry Kissinger. We have Dr. Martin Luther King, so why shouldn't Jill Biden be doctor? Now, first of all, with Henry Kissinger, I think you're dealing with the weird European thing. Europeans love credentials. When you meet some European guy, he hands you his card, it's always like, Günther Rosenstein, BA, MA, a PhD, ASSHOLE. There's this whole thing about these are my credentials. This is what makes me an important person. It's a European thing. Let's set it aside. With Henry Kissinger, it was also the accent. He had an accent going, I think he still has it, into his 80s and 90s. Martin Luther King, he didn't need the doctor. Here's a guy of world-changing importance. Here's a guy who can stand on the great cause that he associated himself with. The doctor is unnecessary. There's no reason, by the way, for people who go to theology schools and get divinity degrees to go around calling themselves doctor. That applies to Martin Luther King. It applies to Dr. Creflo Dollar and every other televangelist who uses the same title. Ridicule, it's a powerful weapon. Now let's turn from Jill Biden to Barack Obama, another guy who has a very thin skin. He's one of the biggest narcissists on the planet. And a lot of my troubles with the Obama administration had to do with ridicule. The background of this is that Obama was prancing around the country, basically saying, "We are our brother's keeper." This was his left-wing, mantra. And the guy had the gall in 2014 to start an organization or to become involved with an organization called "We Are Our Brother's Keeper." So the underlying thing here is we owe a duty to our fellow man because of the biblical idea. We are our brother's keeper, a phrase clearly lifted from the story of Cain and Abel. Here's a tiny snippet from my film, 2016 Obama's America, that exposes Obama's hypocrisy.
During the campaign, I was surfing the web. I saw a story, I believe on CNN, that Obama's half-brother, George Obama, was living in Nairobi in a hut. And I thought this has got to be some kind of a joke, but I click on the story and there's a picture, and it looks like something, out of Slumdog Millionaire. A kid in his 20s standing with his arms outstretched, and the arms reflect the size of the hut. That's it. As you know, during the time of the election, there were some news reports in CNN and elsewhere. The theme of the articles was that Obama had not done anything to help you. Recently, President Obama spoke, and he was quoting from the famous story of Cain and Abel, that we are brother's keeper. Now, my point is, you are his brother. Has he been your keeper?
Go ask him.
A couple of years after my movie came out, I was sitting in my office, and I get a phone call, and I look at the phone, and it says, from Kenya. I'm like, Kenya? It was George Obama. His child was seriously ill, and he said, "Dinesh, would it be possible to wire me $1,000? And I said, "George," I said, "you are the half-brother of the most powerful man in the world. Isn't there somebody else you can call?" And George said, "No." And so I said, "Okay." I walked down to the bank and I wired him $1,000. But I mentioned this only because it shows what a flagrant hypocrite Barack Obama is. This guy is a fraud to the core. Everything that he does in public is for show. In reality, he lives a lifestyle of a billionaire. And all his rhetoric about being our brother's keeper applies to other people, but not to him. So what we have in our society is we have a whole group of people. These are self-styled social justice warriors, but their social justice principles don't apply to themselves. They talk about white privilege and making room for minorities. But if you say to this guy, "Will you give up your job?" and on the condition that it's given to a minority, they're like, "Oh no, I'm not doing." Well, are you willing to give up your position at Princeton to make room for a Latino or a black guy to take your place? No. Their idea is, I'm happy to sacrifice some other guy so I can look like I'm a good guy. So this is the essence of the left. It's a combination of stupidity, incompetence, preening, posturing, and fraud. And you might say, well, wait a minute, Dinesh, didn't all these people, Michelle Obama, didn't she go to Princeton? Didn't Barack Obama go to Columbia, Harvard Law School? And my answer to that is 2 words: affirmative action. On another case of this podcast, I'm going to be reading from Michelle Obama's thesis to illustrate the embarrassment, the intellectual embarrassment of a Michelle Obama graduating from Princeton. It's not just something that shows you a lot about Michelle, it shows you a lot about Princeton and what these universities have now become.